Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I'm Matthew, and this is take 2 because I started crying the first time. Today I'm recording without Steve beside me. If you've listened to the show for a while, you know Steve, my dog, and Dark Poutine official mascot. I look at Mike. I don't know if he's ever official, but I always called him official. Yeah. And I'm sorry to let everyone know today that he died last week.
Yeah.
Bringing him up because, you know, a lot of people write in and call and say, hi, Steve. And it's been a week now and it hit hard. Steve was there for almost every episode that I did since I started recording from my own place. Every story we told, he'd be right here, literally beside me, sometimes asleep. You could hear him snoring often. Mike didn't edit some of that out occasionally, and sometimes just quietly keeping me company while we worked through some pretty heavy material. And if you think about it, that's kind of what the show is too. You know, we sit with difficult things and we don't look away, and somehow maybe it makes these stories a little easier to carry. And Steve was part of that. And I think more so than people probably realize, he was always with me. And losing him, like I said, I knew it would be hard, but it was harder than I imagined. But the show must go on. And it's like, and speaking of the show, you know, it's been difficult to keep it going. We have lots of listeners, but there's been changes to algorithms, you know, by the big corporates. Mike could go on about that for hours. That's made carrying on hard. So, you know, I thought, you know what, if anyone out there has been thinking about doing Patreon and Interact, just giving us some donut money, do it now in honor of our best boy, Steve, because I want to keep going with this show, even without my dogga, because this is a show that he's always been a part of, so he'll be always connected to the show for me. And we'll keep showing up like Steve always did. And Mike wrote this episode before Steve died, and it's called Every Dog Has His Day, which I thought was a little bit coincidental. Mm-hmm. But Stevie, this one's for you.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense, and some listeners may find it disturbing. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and an Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
On the night of Friday, March 1st, 1895, in the paymaster's office of the Montreal Cotton Company in Valleyfield, Quebec, a little town on the St. Lawrence River, 3 men were shot. John Loy, a young clerk beloved by an entire community, died at the foot of a telephone box with a bullet in his brain. Maxime Leboeuf, a night watchman on his normal rounds, left behind a widow and 5 young children. Hugh Wilson survived but carried fragments of lead in his cheek for the rest of his life. The man who pulled the trigger was Francis Valentine Cuthbert Shortis, a 20-year-old Irish immigrant from a wealthy Waterford family who surrendered without resistance and spent the night asking reporters for copies of the newspaper. What followed was the longest murder trial in Canadian history up to that point, and a question that divided not just a courtroom but an entire nation. Was Valentine Shortis a cold-blooded killer, or something the law of 1895 had almost no language to describe? You're listening to Dark Poutine episode 420, Every Dog Has His Day, the case of Valentine Shortis. An arduous work week was coming to an end that evening in early March 1895. The St. Lawrence River was frozen. Valleyfield, Quebec, a small industrial island of 10,000 souls, 30 miles to the west of the city of Montreal, had gone quiet for the night. The streets were cold and dark. The Montreal Cotton Company was the town's single great employer, sitting hulking at the waterfront. The bulk of the work week was over, but in the Cotton Company's main office, 4 men were tying things up for the weekend. Every second Friday, a shipment of $12,000 arrived by train from Montreal, the payroll for the mill's employees, to be distributed the following Monday morning. March 1st, 1895, was one of those Fridays.
That's a lot of money, Mike. How many employees must they've had? I looked it up. That's the equivalent of $472,000 today.
Yeah, the purchasing power of $472,000 today.
Like that's worth stealing, you know? Yeah.
You could buy a house in rural Nova Scotia for that. But to answer your question, I couldn't find an exact number of employees for the Montreal Cotton Company in 1895, but by 1900, there was around 1,500.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of people employed there in a town of 10,000. John Loy, the company cashier, oversaw the operation. Beside him were 2 clerks, John Loy and Hugh Wilson, and a 4th man, Arthur Leboeuf. They sorted cash into pay envelopes, a routine they had done many times before. The work was ordinary, the atmosphere was relaxed, and then, at around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. They all knew the young man standing outside, and they let him in without hesitation. Valentine Shortis was 20 years old, and he'd worked at the Cotton Company as a private secretary until the manager let him go, but he'd stayed on in Valleyfield without employment. He was a conspicuous figure around town. Tall, fair-haired, given to wearing a red sash around his waist, and also known for carrying firearms. The men in that office knew him. He was let in, offered a seat, and sat chatting, eating an apple.
You should start wearing a sash around town.
I don't know. I'm not a sash kind of guy. I'm thinking about, I need a hooded cloak, maybe, but not a sash.
No, I think a red sash and always carrying an apple could be your thing.
Could it?
Yeah, it's your thing. It's your new thing.
Maybe a grade A egg in one hand and a rotten apple in the other.
I want people to send fan art of Mike in a red sash and an apple.
Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since people have sent us fan art. We used to have a few listeners who would send fan art once in a while, but it's been a long time, so maybe now's the time. Oh boy.
Red sash.
Oh, no. The company kept a loaded revolver in a desk drawer. Valentine asked to see it. John Loy, the cashier, removed the shells and handed the gun to Valentine. He examined it, checking the serial number, and handed it back. Loy replaced the shells, and the men returned to their work. As the cash was moved toward the safe, Valentine reached into the drawer, grabbed the gun, and fired point blank at Hugh Wilson, shooting him in the face. Wilson, shocked by the impact, threw up his hands and began to scream. As John Loy ran to give aid to Wilson, Valentine turned to John Loy and said, quote, "If you move, I will shoot you." John Loy jumped toward the telephone box on the wall, presumably to call for the police or a doctor. But before he reached the phone, Valentine, just 5 feet away, shot him in the head. The 24-year-old dropped instantly as the bullet lodged in his brain, dead before he reached the floor. John Loy scooped up the money. He and Arthur Leboeuf ran into the vault and pulled the heavy door shut behind them, holding it closed by hand in the dark. From outside they heard Shortis say, "For God's sake, come out, John. Hughie Wilson is dying." Loy shouted back that the door was stuck, and he told Shortis to turn the combination knob. Shortis did, and locked it, as Loy knew he would. Hugh Wilson, shot through the left cheek, crawled out of the office into the darkened factory floor. Shortis followed him. He lit matches one by one to give himself light, crouching to read the trail of blood on the cement floor. He tracked Wilson to the far end of the factory, found him, and fired again. The bullet entered Wilson's collarbone and came out below the front of his right lung. Shortis left him there, satisfied he was dead. Thankfully, he survived. Valentine returned to the vault. He broke a walking stick and used the pieces to light a fire at the base of the door, attempting to smoke out the 2 men inside. Around midnight, the watchman, Maxime Leboeuf, arrived on his normal rounds. It was a detail of almost unbearable cruelty. Arthur Leboeuf, the man holding the vault door shut in the dark, was Maxime's brother. The watchman knew nothing of what had happened inside. He came around the corner and Valentine shot him 3 times. He died where he fell. In the far darkness of the factory, Hugh Wilson was still alive. He dragged himself to the pump room and raised the alarm, calling for Dr. Walter Sutherland. When he arrived minutes later, Dr. Sutherland tended to Hugh Wilson's injuries. Wilson explained what happened and pointed toward the office, where he said Shortis was still hiding, armed with a revolver. The doctor and another workman armed themselves with iron bars and approached the office. The doctor shouted at Valentine and said, "Hands up." With a tone of resignation, Shortis said, "I want to give myself up. I do not know why I killed these men." Valentine was searched, and under his left arm, concealed in a handkerchief sling suspended around his neck, he had a loaded .22 caliber revolver, and in his coat pocket a large chisel. The company's secretary-treasurer arrived to open the vault. He saw the blood in the office and looked at Shortis and said, "So you're the thing that did that?" Shortis answered, "I'm the man. Shoot me." "Oh no," the official replied. "We'll do better than that for you." They subdued Shortis until the police arrived. The men inside the vault were shaken up but otherwise unharmed. Arthur Leboeuf was distraught on seeing his brother lying in a pool of blood and wanted to render aid, but he was told it was too late. Shortis was taken to the Valleyfield police station and charged with 2 murders. The following morning, from his cell, he dictated a letter to his girlfriend Millie Anderson. Quote, "Telephone home. Do not fret. I remain. Yours lovingly, Shortis." She wrote back the same day, "Keep up heart. All will come right soon. I will always be true. Your own, Millie." At the coroner's inquest that Saturday evening, the Montreal Herald reported that Shortis had gone through the proceedings, quote, "with a coolness that was simply remarkable. He showed no signs whatever of any fear of the result of his crime or sorrow that he had committed it." End quote. Over and over, beneath his breath, he muttered the same words, "All damned fools." Outside in the square, a crowd of over 1,000 people had assembled in the freezing dark. Crown Prosecutor Donald McMaster, who arrived by train that evening, would later estimate the throng ballooned to 1,500, all wanting to catch a glimpse of the killer. Someone in the crowd pointed to a nearby gateway with a high crossbeam and shouted, "Hang him there." The only reason Valentine Shortis was not lynched in the streets of Valleyfield that night was that no one struck the first blow.
That moment always turns my stomach a bit, because what you're hearing there isn't justice, it's appetite.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crowd, cold and angry and frightened, looking for someone to put all that feeling and deciding the fastest way is a rope and a beam. And you have the impulse. A couple men are dead and others barely alive, and the person who did it is right there. And a crowd always wants something immediate and final. And that's exactly why we don't let crowds decide things, Mike, because crowd doesn't weigh evidence. It doesn't hold doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make careful distinctions about responsibility or mental state or even knowing what the facts are.
Yeah.
So if somebody had taken the first swing, that wouldn't have been it. There would be no trial and no questions and no attempt to understand what actually happened. And that it would just be noise and a body at the end of it. Because once that starts, it's not about him anymore or the victims anymore. It's about the crowd and their emotions, right? It's not about you, crowd, right?
You see that a lot in, actually, it seems like it's very prevalent in the UK when there's like a murderous pedo, for example. Like they'll be throwing things at the van that he's being driven away in and saying, "You need to die," and all this kind of. It's a very interesting culturally.
It's one thing I noticed when I moved there. Like people actually, there was recently some riots over like fake news.
Interesting.
Like people hearing that there was a rape or a pedophile or something that didn't even happen. I give our listeners much more benefit of the doubt than that.
I'm pretty sure we've lost the idiots by now.
It's so funny, like, because a lot of people have called in and written in, and we have social media, and there's so many people that listen to us that I love as human beings.
Yep, me too.
Yeah.
To avoid a confrontation, at midnight, Valentine was spirited away by way of a covered sleigh through a snowstorm to the jail in Beauharnois, 15 miles away. What he'd done and why he may have done it was about to divide a country. True crime has a habit of rushing past the dead. The victims often become furniture, names in an indictment, bodies in a coroner's report. This case won't do that. 3 men, human beings, were shot in the paymaster's office of the Montreal Cotton Company on the night of March 1st, 1895. 2 of them died. 1 carried the consequences for the rest of his life. They deserve more than a footnote. Maxime Leboeuf was the night watchman. He came around the corner on his normal midnight rounds doing the job he'd done countless times before and was shot 3 times. 2 bullets in the head, 1 in the body. He died knowing nothing of what had happened inside that office. His brother Arthur was locked in the vault on the other side of the wall. Leboeuf left behind a widow and 5 young children. The entirety of his family's financial safety net was a $1,000 life insurance policy. The Montreal Cotton Company paid for his funeral. Bishop J.M. Emard, one of the most prominent figures in the Quebec Catholic Church, presided. By 8 o'clock in the morning, an hour before the service began, 4,000 people had filled the Valleyfield Cathedral. 2,000 of them later followed the procession through a blinding snowstorm to the Roman Catholic cemetery a mile away. In the weeks following the murders, Francis Shortis Sr., Valentine's father back in Ireland, told the press he had sent Mrs. Leboeuf $1,000 in sympathy. Mrs. Leboeuf wrote directly to the Montreal Herald to deny it. "I declare to you that I never received a cent, and I ask you to say so." The money did exist, but she'd not seen it yet. Shortis Sr. had sent it to defense counsel Greenshields, who had decided it was better not to hand it over until after the trial, not wanting the gesture to appear in front of a jury as something closer to a bribe. The money eventually reached Mrs. Leboeuf through a priest, but for a widow and 5 children, it was merely a token. John Loy was 24 years old. He was a clerk at the cotton mill, the young man who ran for the telephone to call a doctor, who had his hand on the receiver when Shortis turned and fired. 1 bullet entered his brain. He fell in a heap at the foot of the telephone box and didn't get up. The Loys were among the most prominent families in Valleyfield. John's grandfather, of Portuguese descent, had been a doctor in the district. His father, George Loy, was the mayor of the town. John himself was, by every account, the kind of person who a community builds itself around. The English-language Huntington Gleaner called him, quote, the most exemplary English-speaking young man in Valleyfield. The French-language paper, Progrès de Valleyfield, wrote that, quote, had you searched the country over, one could not have met with anyone nicer, end quote. Loy's funeral, described by the Herald as, quote, one of the largest ever known in this part of the country, was held that same Monday afternoon at the Presbyterian Church. And in a town that was predominantly French and predominantly Catholic, something unusual happened. The Montreal Star noted it plainly, quote, the dead men were beloved by all, French and English, Catholics and Protestants, all joined in the common grief. Race or religious distinctions were forgotten in the common mourning, end quote. Hugh Wilson was the first man shot and the only one of the three to survive. The bullet entered his left cheek, dislodged 3 teeth, and embedded itself in his tongue. He was shot again as he fled, twice more as he ran, both missing, and then pursued through the darkened factory by a man lighting matches to follow the trail of blood on the floor. As we mentioned, when Shortis found him and fired a final time, the bullet entered his collarbone and exited below his left lung. Wilson survived by playing dead there on the floor. Thankfully, Shortis believed the ruse. By the time the trial began, he had spent months near death. When he finally took the witness stand, the first time he had ever given evidence, the first time he and Shortis had been in the same room since that night, Shortis wouldn't look him in the eye. The bullet in his cheek could not be surgically extracted. A large portion of it worked its way out on its own 2 months after. Let's not forget the 2 men who were in the vault, John Loy, the cashier, and Arthur Leboeuf, Maxime's brother, who had sealed themselves inside and held the door shut. They'd heard the shots. They smelled the smoke as Shortis lit a fire against the door to drive them out. They stayed in the dark and held on, terrified about what would happen next. They were alive when it was over, but alive is not the same as unscathed. And in this case, for everyone who survived that night, the damage had only just begun. Many people in Valleyfield knew Valentine Shortis before the night of March 1st. That's the part of the story that stays with them. He wasn't a stranger who arrived, killed, and disappeared. He was a familiar face. He was one of them. Francis Valentine Cuthbert Shortis was born in Waterford Island on St. Valentine's Day, 1875, thus the name, the only child of exceptionally wealthy parents. His father, Francis Sr., was one of Ireland's leading cattle dealers, exporting livestock to the British mainland and worth well over $250,000. His mother, Mary, had suffered multiple miscarriages before Valentine arrived and devoted herself to him with an intensity that many around her considered excessive. Valentine's father saw his son very differently. The boy needed to stand on his own 2 feet. Letters of introduction were obtained from the Roman Catholic Bishop of Waterford and from a major importer in Liverpool. And in September 1893, at the age of 18, Valentine Shortis boarded the SS Laurentian alone, bound for Montreal. Passengers on the ship later recalled that the young man wept bitterly and remained visibly depressed for days. Montreal did not suit him. He rented a room in the commercial district and attempted to establish a bicycle agency. He was, people said, always talking about bicycles and guns. He rode away for catalogs. He drifted. His mother eventually crossed the Atlantic to help, arranging a position for him without pay at a woolen mill before returning to Ireland. Friends in Montreal urged her to take her son home with her. She knew it was impossible. His father had made his position clear. It was through these Montreal connections that Louis Simpson, the general manager of the Montreal Cotton Company in Valleyfield, hired Shortis as a private secretary on a 2-month trial basis. Simpson was not impressed. Shortis could not take shorthand. He was let go, but permitted to remain at the mill without pay to learn the cotton business. That arrangement ended in December 1894, 3 months before the murders. By then, Shortis had made himself a fixture in Valleyfield. He was impossible to overlook. The red sash was part of it, but so were the guns. He carried 2 revolvers, one in each hand, Western style, and was not shy about using them. 3 months before the murders, he was hauled before a justice of the peace and fined $5 for firing simultaneously at 2 mill workers he decided were talking too loudly. He'd also taken up with Millie Anderson, the daughter of late Alexandra Anderson, a former mayor of Valleyfield and prominent local industrialist. Lewis Simpson disapproved of the relationship and said it was a distraction from Valentine's training at the Cotton Company and wanted Valentine to end the relationship. Shortis, who was smitten, refused. 1 month before the murders, according to later testimony, Valentine Shortis and Millie's younger brother Jack hatched a plan to kill Lewis Simpson outright. Their stepfather, Bob McGinnis, got wind of it and warned the manager, who confronted Shortis directly, leave Valleyfield or face a conspiracy to murder charge. This, of course, is the incident that caused the abrupt end of Valentine's Cotton Company training. Valentine left the manager's office with a parting remark that would echo through the subsequent trial. To the man who'd just dismissed him, refused him a reference, and now threatened him with a criminal charge, he said, "Every dog has its day, and it will be my turn next." The morning after the murders, with 2 men dead and a third fighting for his life, the defense position was established almost immediately. Shortis's father cabled him from Ireland. His son, quote, "must have been mad to commit such a fearful act." He offered to send, in his own words, certificates of the insanity of my poor father, uncle, brother, and aunt. The defense released the letter to the press the same day, of course. A commission was eventually granted to travel to Waterford and gather testimony about Shortis's behavior and his family's psychiatric history. Defense counsel Greenshields led the trip and on his return gave a lengthy interview to a reporter on the veranda of his summer residence in the eastern townships. What the Irish witnesses had described, he said, was extraordinary. Shortis had stabbed one of his father's dogs, quote, all the time shouting and laughing with the fiendishness of a maniac, end quote. He had driven a pitchfork into his father's cattle until they bellowed in pain. He had shot a cat tied to the foot of a machine, and when asked about it afterward, he said he, quote, wanted to see how many bullets the cat could stand before it succumbed, end quote. He'd fired at the open portholes of a passing steamer ship and at the town clock opposite his family home. A witness testified that he'd shot at a young girl grazing her arm. Another said he had tried to trample a child with his pony. Crown Prosecutor McMaster accompanied the commission to Ireland and was having none of it. In a telegram to the Attorney General of Quebec, he was blunt, quote, "It's easy to find people who, for a consideration, will give bogus evidence, and the Crown should carefully guard itself against this contingency." End quote. The people of Valleyfield had their own theory, and it had nothing to do with insanity. They believed that the motive was straightforward: $12,000 in a paymaster's office and a plan to go west with Millie Anderson. Shortis had, after all, reportedly approached a co-worker months earlier with a proposition. Quote, "Say, Mike, how would you like to make $1,000? And he outlined exactly how the mill's payroll could be taken. The co-worker had not taken it seriously, and he told no one until after the murders. 2 theories, 1 man, a courtroom that would spend 29 days trying to determine which was true. Was Valentine Shortis a cold-blooded robber who'd feigned madness with the help of wealthy parents and a well-paid legal team? Or was he something the law of 1895 had almost no language to describe? Canada's most celebrated psychiatrists were about to take the stand, and their testimony would be unlike anything a Canadian court had ever heard. After the break, We'll hear about the longest murder trial in Canadian history to that point, and the 4 doctors who would define it. We'll be right back. And we are back at the halfway point, Matthew. Thoughts so far?
This is one of those cases where knowing what happened is really kind of the easy part.
Yeah.
We can follow the sequence, we can see the decisions, and we can sit with the violence and the impact it had on people in the room. But what's harder, and I think what you're going to get into now, Mike, and I think what makes this case interesting is how you make sense of someone like this inside a system that needs clear answers. And because the law wants categories, guilty or not, sane or insane.
Right.
And this case doesn't sit really super comfortably in those areas.
Agreed.
Planning and control and sequence, but at the same time, you have behavior that doesn't quite line up with a stable, rational mind.
Yeah.
And you have an error in the law books. What you're going to get to. So the question isn't just, did he do it? It becomes, what do we do with them?
Right.
And that's where things get complicated. And that's the meat of this one.
Yep.
See, I read this one, Mike.
I know you did. The 2 men chosen to fight this case were, in almost every respect, mirror images of each other. Donald McMaster, QC, led for the Crown. J.N. Greenshields, QC, led for the defense. Both had graduated from McGill University with the Torrance Gold Medal. Both had been members of Parliament. Both were the most sought-after lawyers in Quebec, and they had once been law partners, and now were set to stand off against each other in an important legal battle. McMaster had arrived in Valleyfield the night of the murders, gone to the scene, and written to the Attorney General the next morning, quote, "It was the most shocking sight I ever saw, and I have never heard or read anything that equaled the brutality and disregard of life exhibited by the accused." He never wavered. Shortis was sane, the motive was robbery, and the rope was warranted. Greenshields was a Liberal, director of the Montreal Herald, who had defended Louis Riel in 1885 and lost no client to the gallows. Joining him was Henri St. Pierre, QC, 50 years old, and widely considered the finest criminal defense lawyer in the province. Before the trial began, both sides fought procedural battles. The defense pushed for a change of venue away from Beauharnois. Judge Belanger denied it, ruling there was no widespread or deep-seated prejudice against Shortis in the district. The trial opened on October 1st, 1895, before Judge Michel Mathieu of the Quebec Superior Court. Jury selection alone consumed a day and a half. 40 potential jurors were summoned. The first had already formed the opinion that Shortis was guilty. The second told St. Pierre directly that it made no difference whether the accused was insane, he should hang regardless. A third was equally plain, quote, "If he was insane or sane, I'd swing him anyway." At that, Shortis visibly twitched. His mother began to cry. The Crown's case rested on eyewitness testimony from Loy and Wilson and on mill employee Ernest McVicker, who testified that Shortis had approached him multiple times to discuss robbing the mill and intercepting the money train from Montreal. McVicker told no one until after the 2 men were dead. The defense called 4 psychiatrists. Not one of them hedged. Dr. James Anglin of the Verdun Protestant Asylum concluded that Shortis suffered from congenital imbecility compounded by delusional insanity, incurable, and at the time of the killings was not capable of knowing that he was doing wrong. Dr. C.K. Clark, medical superintendent of the Rockwood Asylum in Kingston, told the court that Shortis's, quote, "whole being convinced me that he was what is commonly called a moral imbecile." When Clark asked Shortis about his cruelty to animals in Ireland, Shortis recounted it, quote, in the most matter-of-fact way, and when pressed about the cats he had shot, laughed that they were deucedly unlucky and he hated the beggars, end quote. Dr. Daniel Clark, superintendent of the Toronto Lunatic Asylum and principal defense psychiatrist in the Riel case, testified that Shortis was, quote, a natural congenitive imbecile on which has been implanted insanity. There was no chance whatever of his recovery. Asked whether Shortis would have fired if a policeman had been present, Clark replied, quote, I believe that the prisoner would have fired, just the same if 3 or 4 policemen had been present, end quote. The fourth psychiatrist, Dr. R.M. Buck, superintendent of the London Lunatic Asylum, the largest in Ontario, entered the courtroom with a decided limp, the result of losing both his feet to frostbite while prospecting in the American West. He was 58 years old. His testimony, quote, I say that the prisoner is a natural or congenital imbecile, both morally and intellectually, and I also say he is a lunatic, end quote. McMaster's response was to attack the profession itself. In his address to the jury, quote, there is a certain class of doctors that have been brought so much in contact with the insane that actually they become more or less insane themselves. These doctors have been so tinged with insanity that if you even mention insanity, they are ready to pick it out of everybody that comes in their way. These men are now universally called mad doctors or extremists, end quote. Canada's 1892 criminal code contained a single word error that made the insanity defense nearly impossible to mount. The McNaughton rules of 1843 had used the word or. An accused needed to prove either that he could not appreciate the nature of his act or that he did not know it was wrong. A draftsman's error in an 1880 British parliamentary bill changed or to and, meaning both had to be proven simultaneously. Canada copied it. The error was unchallenged until 1931. The defense also argued irresistible impulse. Judge Mathieu, that's the French Matthew, rejected it. The law does not recognize it. We are not here to make the law. We cannot make the law. We have no power to make the law, end quote.
So this whole and or thing, I actually wrestle with. I spent an hour debating this in my head today. Part of me thinks maybe it should be and. Maybe insanity should mean that you're completely gone and you don't understand what you're doing and don't understand that it's wrong.
Right.
Because otherwise, where's the line? And I'll be honest, if somebody shot me and they understood the act but claimed they didn't know it was wrong or the other way around, I'd still want them found guilty. Right?
Sure you would.
But that's the human reaction, and that's where most of us would probably land. But the law isn't just dealing with what feels fair in the moment. It's trying to account for what actually is going on in someone's mind as well, right? And that's where all of this gets really uncomfortable, because there are people out there who can act with purpose, but whose sense of right and wrong is so distorted that it doesn't function the way we expect it to. And once you admit that space exists, it's hard to draw a clean line. But again, Mike, if somebody murdered you, I'd want it to be and. Right. Before they were found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Regardless of the outcome, if you are aware of the crime and maybe related to the person who was killed, finding the killer not criminally responsible due to mental defect is really tough to swallow.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that small word, I had such a debate with it, and maybe the typesetter just assumed they meant and put it in there, right?
Yeah, it's funny how a tiny little word changed can affect something so much.
Yeah.
After 29 days, the longest murder trial in Canadian history, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. November 4th, 1895. Shortis was brought into court. He nodded to the press, smiled at the judge. Neither of his parents were present for the first time. Asked whether he had anything to say before sentence, he replied in a clear, steady voice, "No, thank you." Judge Mathieu placed a black cap on his head and read the sentence, quote, Francis Valentine Cuthbert Shortis, you shall be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and may God have mercy on your soul. Shortis responded in a mock Cockney accent, I wish to thank you, my lord, for the kindness and consideration you have shown me and all the people connected with this honourable court have given me whilst I have been here. He walked calmly back to his cell. The execution was set for January 3rd, 1896. On Christmas Day, executioner J.R. Radcliffe of Toronto wrote to Sheriff Leboeuf, quote, "In case my services are required, will be with you on Monday at latest to see to everything. I am, sir, your obedient servant, J.R. Radcliffe." He arrived on December 30th. He and the sheriff agreed on the location, the second floor of the shed, a trapdoor, a railway lever brought from Toronto to spring it. Construction began. Through Solicitor Foster, Mrs. Shortis asked that her son's body be returned to her. The Attorney General agreed, instructing the sheriff to, quote, "deliver body to mother without mutilation." In his cell, Shortis spent Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Eve with Father Divine. Twice a day they celebrated Mass. Canada in December 1895 was fracturing over the Manitoba schools question, whether the federal government should override provincial legislation stripping rights from French Catholic schools. 3 French-Canadian ministers had already resigned from Bowell's Conservative cabinet. An election was imminent. The question of whether to commute Shortis's sentence arrived into this context. Louis Riel had been hanged in 1885 after a failed insanity defense. Amédée Châtel, a French-Canadian, had been hanged in Ontario earlier that same year without defense counsel and without an insanity plea, despite appearing to be genuinely mad. If those men hanged, how could the cabinet spare Shortis? On the other hand, if Shortis hanged, Wilfrid Laurier had his election argument. The Conservatives had hanged French speakers and spared the Englishmen. The cabinet met 4 times. The vote was tied. The second went 7-5 in favor of hanging. Someone had switched their vote between sessions. No record survives of who exactly it was. A confidential memo reported that Mrs. Shortis, Valentine's mother, had asked an official named Augustus Power whether there was anything they could do financially, contributing to election funds, to save her son. Power warned her off. Bowell wrote to Aberdeen, quote, "If Mrs. Shortis would make suggestions to a responsible officer of such an outrageous character, no doubt she has been trying the same in other quarters." The Progrès de Valleyfield asked openly whether, quote, "money or justice will triumph. So far, the dollars seem to turn the scales," end quote.
I despise this so much. Even though I don't agree with the death penalty, because now it's not just what he did, but it's about who gets to try to bend the outcome of somebody found guilty. And the idea that you can even ask if money will change sort of what's in the law is just so insulting for the vast majority of us human beings that don't have that opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Or don't have get that version of the system. And for being honest, that gap's widening with the super rich, right? People are getting away with stuff because they have money, and that just boils my frog. I don't know if that's a saying, but
it boils your frog. Oh, I kind of like that. That's a new one. Instead of, well, that really grinds my gears, that boils my frog.
I don't know what this saying is.
But I like that, though. We need to start using that. Matthew, what boils your frog today?
Ooh, that really boils my frog.
That's a new catchphrase for the show. Well, that really boils my frog. Oh, boy. Poor frog. He didn't do anything to deserve that, by the way.
It's good to laugh a little bit today. It's been well over a week since I have.
Yeah. The 4th vote came on December 30th. The same morning that Radcliffe was in Beauharnois measuring the gallows. It was tied again. 6 for hanging, 6 opposed. Lord Aberdeen acted unilaterally. Quote, "I decide that the sentence of death pronounced upon the prisoner Shortis shall be commuted to imprisonment for life as a criminal lunatic." End quote. The telegram did not reach Beauharnois until 11 o'clock New Year's morning. Shortis had spent New Year's Eve believing he had 3 days to live. In Valleyfield, a mob of 150 men seized a train at the Grand Trunk station and attempted to drive it to Beauharnois. The one who could operate the engine refused. A snowstorm blocked the roads. Wilfrid Laurier won the 1896 election. Valentine Shortis spent approximately 10 years at St. Vincent de Paul Penitentiary. The records from that period were destroyed by fire. In 1905, he was transferred to Kingston Pen, showing marked signs of paranoid insanity. Dr. Clark visited and reported Shortis believed he was, quote, the victim of all sorts of machinations by unseen enemies. His food is poisoned every day. He cannot sleep on his bed because it is loaded with poison. The Kingston Insane Ward held cells 2.5 feet wide, locked from 4 in the afternoon until 7 in the morning, with no sanitary conveniences, i.e. no toilet except for a chamber pot. There was no classification of patients, no psychiatric treatment beyond one hurried daily visit from the prison doctor. In 1915, Valentine was transferred to the Guelph Reformatory. His condition showed, quote, remarkable improvement. He became the chief baker and was permitted unescorted trips into the town. In 1932, when the criminally insane were transferred to the new facility at Penetanguishene, Shortis was left behind by a special order in council. With no legal framework to hold him at Guelph, a further order in council designated K Cell No. 6 as an official Ontario mental hospital. Just his one little cell. When he arrived at Penetanguishene in 1936, Dr. Charles Hanna noted, quote, no psychotic manifestations. He appears to be one who in society would probably be considered eccentric. The Ontario Department of Health asked the Department of Justice to return him to a penitentiary, noting 2 psychiatrists were, quote, of the opinion that he is not now insane, end quote. On Saturday, April 3, 1937, after 15,071 days in continuous confinement, Valentine Shortis, now 62, was released. He lived in Toronto under an assumed name and died of a heart attack in 1941. The Telegram reported that he had been, quote, a familiar figure in Toronto distinguished by his goatee, monocle, and cane, and he was known to hundreds but only few had an inkling of his past, end quote. The Star reported incorrectly that he had been educated at Oxford. The Telegram added also incorrectly that he could speak half a dozen languages perfectly. Papers were like that then. Hugh Wilson was still the cashier at the Montreal Cotton Company when Shortis was released. He wrote to his member of Parliament, quote, as one of the principals in that tragedy, I hereby register through my strong objection to any action which might lead to his release. Hugh Wilson added, quote, if he should ever succeed in gaining his release, I would have him rearrested and tried for the murder of Leboeuf, end quote. He'd only been tried and found guilty of John Loy's killing. John Loy's father had lived long enough to protest the original commutation, and then the talk of release decades later. Maxime Leboeuf's widow and 5 children had received $1,000 eventually through a priest. The draftsman's error. The word and, where or should have been, shaped the insanity defense in Canada for 40 years. How many were wrongly hanged because of it will never be known. As Friedland notes in their book, modern psychiatry would most likely diagnose Shortis with an antisocial personality disorder, a condition which, under Canadian law today, would not have exempted him from criminal responsibility. He would in all likelihood have been convicted again. Hugh Wilson carried lead in his cheek from that night for the rest of his life. Maxime Leboeuf's children grew up without a father, and young John Loy never made it to 25. That's it for Dark Poutine episode 420, Every Dog Has Its Day, the case of Valentine Shortis.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Okay, we have 3 voicemails this week. Actually, one is split into 2 parts, a 1A and 1B, and then we have a second one. So we'll listen in that way.
Okay.
So here we go.
Hi, guys. It's Jay Gillis calling from Prince Edward Island. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Just wanted to mention that, Mike, you're an amazing storyteller, and I'm loving your audio book. And I love how you do your accents. And Matthew, you talk with such elegance. I picture you sitting in a cigar room, a dim cigar room, listening to jazz with a bunch of guys wearing suits sitting around you. See if that's any close. Yeah, I love listening to you guys, and unfortunately, I'm finished listening to all the episodes, and that's why I got the audio book, because I started listening to other true crime podcasts, and they're just not the same. So, all right, love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, that's part one of his...
Can I jump in just first before I go to two?
Absolutely. Let's address that first.
So first of all, I'm glad somebody likes your accents.
What do you mean?
The second thing is I do like jazz, but in terms of what I wear, somebody on the street today told me, a total stranger told me my outfit looks like I took it from the set of Price is Right.
That's true.
So not an elegant smoking jacket.
No. It's very over the top. Yeah. What do you mean you don't like my accent? Matthew, you don't like my accents? Some people really dig them. I like doing them.
I've found that nobody has a benign attitude towards jazz either. People either really like jazz or absolutely loathe jazz. There are very few people that are like, it's okay.
Well, let's listen to part two of Jay's call before we go any further.
Hi, it's Jay from PEI again. I forgot the tradition. I'll do this in my best soprano Bugs Bunny accent. Yeah, go shit in your hat.
See? Accents are fun, Matthew.
So that was Bugs Bunny if he was on the Sopranos.
Go shit in your hat.
Bugs Bunny on the Sopranos, right?
I should have turned left at Banff.
Do a Sopranos line with Bugs Bunny's voice.
Oh, this is a bit crass. It's something that Phil Leotardo says after he gets out of jail.
20 years in the can and I jacked off into a tissue.
Is that supposed to be Bugs Bunny?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just hear me doing a voice, but other people hear this wonderful impression.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yes, they do. People don't like it when you give me a hard time about that.
Oh, really? That's okay. What does Jay do for a living?
What does Jay do for a living? I think he's a voiceover artist for anime, for Japanese anime. Yeah, he does the English versions.
And he's a jazz musician in his free time.
And he's a jazz musician with a smoking jacket in his...
Yeah, he has the big bass. He does the bass. Boom,
he has
boom, 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 boom.
He has a big bass, Matthew.
The big bass.
Alrighty. Next up, we have a voicemail from a many-time caller. It's
Lacey.
It's our good friend Lacey from Calgary.
I love Lacey from Calgary.
Let's see what she had to say.
Hi, it's Lacey from Calgary. I haven't called in a little while, and I like to try and call regularly just so you guys have someone calling you. I was going to call and just be like, hey, my life was totally changed for the better, knowing the canoe measure of distance between you and Matthew. But I'm calling today more for a sad reason. I saw the post on Facebook about Steve, and I just wanted to offer my condolences to Matthew. Losing a pet is a different kind of pain. So I'm wishing you support and healing, and it was wonderful to know that you gave him such a loving home and life. I enjoy rescuing senior dogs because I feel the seniors need the most love. I want to make sure that their lives are good before they leave. But again, it does open us up to heartache. So hold on to the good things. If you listen to the supernatural circumstances, you'll know, he's still with you. And energy continues. And it's not about their transition out of this world that matters to them. So don't focus on that. Just focus on the love and joy. Anyway, I'm sorry if this opens up more wounds for you, but I care, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. Anyway, love you guys. You do a great job as always. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for that, Lacey. Yeah, we actually skipped recording last week because it happened last week, and I was not in a good spot. And in fact, Mike had to stop the recording a couple times today because I started crying. So it's been a week. I'm starting to, the immediate pain was still there, but I'm starting to go, oh my God, I was so lucky to have that guy in my life. Right. So starting to think that way. Mike said, Mike was like, where are you sitting? Because the background is out my window. It's because I've put my desk in the middle of the room in this stupid place. I have to shimmy between it and the guest bed because I couldn't have the desk in the same spot with where Steve lies all the time. I kept on looking down at it. So I've literally rearranged furniture in order to get over this somehow. But thank you, Lacey. This is the first episode back, and it's tough. And Queen Elizabeth said, grief is the price you pay for having loved. So, and I love that saying, and I feel that. But yeah, it's I appreciate the kind words. I'll be fine.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Alrighty, it's time for Patreon and donut money donors, Matthew. And guess what? There's a change this week because we've got a few
excellent
donut money donors, because I added a way for people to donate at buymeacoffee.com. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/darkpoutine, you can make a donation toward the show. Give us some donut money. So anyway, so we have a couple from there. We're going to say, there's three actually, so we'll save one. And then we have 2 PayPal donations as well, but we'll save one of those. So,
because we're recording another show soon, so
right, we're going to record another show right after.
We like to announce them out, so we give all you guys a little bit of time.
Well, yeah, and also, we want to make sure that we're upbeat, and it seems like people are donating.
Yay!
Yay! Anyway, so first up, we have Doug Wands. Doug came to us at buymeacoffee.com, and he says, longtime listeners should have supported the show sooner. Love the show. Heart emoji. Well, thank you,
Doug. That's
great. Where is
great.
Doug, and what does he do, Matthew?
I think Doug is in Albuquerque, New York.
Albuquerque, New York. Is there such a thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And there is now, if there wasn't before.
I have no idea. I'm just making it up. And I thought Albuquerque because we're talking about Bugs Bunny earlier.
Albuquerque.
I should have made that left hand at Albuquerque. Who said that? Yeah. Somebody said that.
Yeah.
I think Albuquerque is in New York, isn't it?
No, it's New Mexico.
Really?
Yes, 100% it is.
Okay. Well, Doug's from Albuquerque, New York.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Doug, I get a musician vibe from Doug, actually.
Doug Wands, W-A-N-S, Doug Wands.
Doug Wands, and Doug plays lead guitar in a band that plays in bars across the continent.
Yeah, they play in Albuquerque, New York, and they play in Buffalo, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you, Doug. Much appreciated. Also from buymeacoffee.com, we have Jeanette Nadeau, and Jeanette says, love the show. Well, thank you, Jeanette. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jeanette.
And where's Jeanette from? I'm curious, Matthew.
Nipissing.
Nipissing, near in Ontario.
Yeah, she's from Nipissing.
Okay.
And she owns a private bank.
She owns a private bank.
Yeah, so she's a private bank owner.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
that's kind of a good idea.
In Nipissing, because
bank.
Nipissing decided that they're only going to allow private banks, so it's not huge, and she gives good interest rates.
There you go.
And she doesn't screw her customers out of their money.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a good bank. I'd go to Jeanette's bank, 100%.
Good. I would go too. I would go too. Why not? Why the heck not, Matthew? Alrighty, from good old PayPal, we have another donation. We have Carrie Ann Turnbull, and Carrie Ann says, Hi guys, love the podcast. Just listened to Thunderbird, and you guys need to visit the Raptors on Vancouver Island if you haven't already. Take care, and if you are ever in Quebec, allow me to teach you how to pronounce poutine properly. Une crotte dans ton tuque. So go shit in your hand in French. Well, thank you, Carrie Ann. Lots of people have corrected me in saying poutine and whatever. I say it that way. It's a regional pronunciation is what we're claiming.
It's called the English pronunciation of poutine.
Yeah, exactly. We do believe that Quebec has a distinct society. We agree with that.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
But we cannot wrap our tongues around that, though.
Exactly.
It is actually, the other way is the proper way of pronouncing it, for some reason, is actually difficult.
Yeah.
Like if you're an English speaker, it's one of the, lots of other words I can do perfectly in French, but that one I cannot wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and I did that to myself on purpose, I think. I don't know. My silly brain. So what does Carrie Ann do there in Quebec, Matthew?
She owns a little chalet.
A chalet? Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
That she rents out near the Jacques Cartier Parc National.
Okay, well there you go.
Yeah.
That sounds lovely. I would like to go to a chateau in that neck of the woods. That would be kind of nice. I love Quebec. I really do. I really like Quebec.
Do you know how? It's so, I don't know, some Quebecers laugh at me when I talk about the drive from Montreal to Trois-Rivières, sort of the farmland I just find so beautiful between those cities. And I don't know, there's probably more beautiful places in Quebec, but I really like that area.
Yeah.
Up towards Trois-Rivières, it's really nice.
Some people are probably just like, ugh, I see it too many times.
Yeah. I drive to work every day.
Dion saying that.
I drive to work every day, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Carrie Ann. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.